Hey, welcome to the AudioNowcast. My name is Mike Rodriguez, and before we get going, let me introduce the guys. Starting with the one and only Mr. Scott Gershin. Scott, welcome.
Hey, everybody.
Next, we have Mr. Brandon Burnside.
What's up, Mike? What's up, guys? Good to see everyone.
And then we have Mr. Nick Peck.
Hello, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I don't think I've done a really big one like that for a while, so I thought I would just say hi to everyone.
And finally, we've got the Iron Man of the AudioNowcast. This is show number 215, Mr. Rob Arbittier.
Hey, Mike. Hey, everybody. It's good to see everybody again.
Hey, Rob. And today I'm so excited. I mean, I've been excited for like all weekend ever since I got the confirmation that they were going to be here.
You're always excited, Mike.
That's true. But I am super excited because we have Mr. Dave Smith and Mr. Andrew McGowan from Sequential joining us today. We're going to talk about the reintroduction of the Prophet-5. So Dave and Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. This is awesome.
And we're going to spend some time, the whole time, talking about that because there's so much to talk about. But before we talk about that, I just have to mention that, a couple days ago, Eddie Van Halen passed away. And that really struck a chord with me because he was he redefined guitar and rock and roll, and he made popular the hammer-on lick and his playing style and his showmanship. And he made he was a joy to watch. If you ever saw him in concert, he was just so fun. And I just wanted to mention a little something about that because he was such a legend. And did anybody ever? I didn't have a chance to work with him. I know he used API gear, but I've never had a chance to actually meet him. But there's some jamming going on in heaven right now. All right. Well, we're going to segue from that to. Well, there's just no smooth way to do this.
Jump.
So, yeah, this is going to be a jump. I'll tell you what. We'll just do a jump cut.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go. We're going to talk about the reintroduction of the Prophet-5. But before we even get into that, I just got to say, I've always been a huge Sequential fan. The very first keyboard that I actually touched was a 6-track, and it just changed my life. And later on I was talking with Andrew, and there was a good chance that he made that 6-track that I had touched over at Satellite College. And then when I was teching, the very first keyboard that I came across was a Prophet-5, and let me tell you, it was like having a Ferrari, just here you go. You got to work with this. Because back then, it was a Prophet-5. That was the keyboard to have. And it was just really great. So I've always been a big fan of Sequential. And then I found out last week through the announcement that the Prophet-5 was coming back. And then I actually sent an email. Well, I called up Joanne from Sequential and I said, hey, do you think they'll do the podcast? I really want to talk about it. And I sent them an email. So I sent them an email. Dave said yes. And then I've been excited ever since. So Dave, here you are.
Here I am. Where do you want to start?
Excited. So let's just start. Tell us about what brought you to the point to reintroduce the Prophet-5. I just thought that was never going to happen, but here we are.
Me too. And I'm on record many times saying, why would I do a Prophet-5? I already did it once. Why would I do it again? Blah, blah, blah. And so, basically that was my mindset. I'm always looking forward to whatever it is that we're designing and building next. But actually this time, my memory shot, so I pick things to remember. But an acquaintance of ours, a guy in Berlin, out of the blue, sent me a email, said, Dave, why don't you just do the Prophet-5 and make everybody happy and do it before Uli does it? So you really ought to do it. And for some reason, that email, we always talk about it. it's been a side topic for years. And for some reason, that just sort of resonated with me. Thanks, Pablo, if you're listening to this. He knows that. I've sent him an email since. And we started talking about it. Internally, what tends to happen is whenever I get an idea, I'll kind of ping Andrew. And when Andrew gets an idea, he pings me. And, you know, most of the time things go nowhere. And one of us will just say, nah, dumb idea, whatever. And this was one of the ones where it just resonated with both of us. And one of the first things that came up was having both filters. Because we knew this new filter was coming out from SSI, a Dave Rossum designed modern filter equivalent of the original 2040 that he designed back in 1977, probably. And that was, I think, maybe the key thing that really said, you know what, this would be awesome if we could encapsulate the Rev 1 and the Rev 2 and the Rev 3 and settle all of the old stories once and for all. And but at the same time, we didn't want to drastically change it. I don't know how many of you actually looked at it. I mean, there's one right here, and it looks virtually identical. I think we added 2 knobs and a handful of switches, mostly to add USB and modern crap they have to have these days. That, yeah, there we go. There's the photo. So the next major step, and it was just kind of another one of these things that just showed up, was doing a vintage knob, because it's one thing to switch between the filters, but there's a whole lot more going on. Because, you know, what happened is a lot of design was going on just as a pandemic started. So I was stuck at home with the very first prototypes and a Rev 3. And so I had to kind of learn how to Rev 3 worked. I was finding bugs in the original hardware design and things that actually affected the sound. And we just kind of collectively realized that, well, if we do it right, we could model this vintage knob. And it's different than our old slop knobs that some of you guys are familiar with. It does a lot more. We find it very musical, and there's some sweet spots on that knob depending on the sound you're playing that just it's hard to describe without and you know, we just stuck the knob on there and said, well, we'll just define it in software later. But once we got to that point when everything else was running, it's like wow, it's like this is the key to this instrument, that and having the 2 filters and everything else being a Prophet-5. And it just, and I'm babbling beyond your initial question, but
No,
That's what you're here for, Dave.
that's right. Okay, I'm approved to keep going. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. Andrew, you could probably fill in. I mean, there's a million things tangents we can go on, but
well, you know, as Dave said, the key things for me, the real hook was the ability to put the 2 filters in there. As soon as we started talking about that, it was like, okay, yeah, we should do this.
Hey, Andrew, what did you, when he first came to you, what was your first response? Was it like, no,
I was shocked.
Was it like, really?
It was like, really? You want to do that? Because, you know, he has said he's not going to do it. So yeah, it was, I just kind of like dumb amazement. I was like,
we wore him down.
Really? Well, maybe. I think it's just simpler than that. I lied. I was planning it for the last 40 years. I knew I was going to do it.
Yo, I remember I went to the 40th anniversary of the Prophet-5, and
That's right.
I remember talking, and you were not exactly positive about it ever, you know, coming back, but
not then.
Yeah,
it was this was probably what, a year ago, maybe last summer.
yeah,
That the idea gained a little bit of traction, because we are still finishing up the Pro 3. And, you know, we always try to get our next product lined up. And the Pro 3 ended up being a real difficult baby to get out the door for a lot of reasons. Of course, it paid off because it's an awesome synth too. But
yeah, most of them technical, not
yes, yeah,
not design problems really,
but we at least started talking up the P5, and some of the concepts started coming in. And once we started rolling, it was just so much fun. It was I had a blast working on it. I don't think I've had that much fun in a long time. And I like designing all of our instruments. Let me rephrase that. I don't design all of our instruments, but the parts that I do, I always really enjoyed. But this one I think was special.
Hey, Andrew, really quick, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell people what you do over at Sequential? Because everybody knows who Dave Smith is, and I just want to introduce you because you're in there the whole time.
I kind of like people not knowing who I am, but so I started working at Sequential Circuits in 1979 when I was 20. I started out as an electromechanical assembler building Rev 2 Prophet-5s. Did various things there over the years. For most of my working life, that was the longest I'd ever worked somewhere. I worked at Sequential for almost 9 years, and then worked at Yamaha for a little bit after Yamaha bought Sequential. I worked at Passport Designs, music software company. I worked at Sear Systems with Dave, software synthesizer company. You know, I actually kind of got out of the music business for about 10 years. I was contracting, doing various things. And then Dave called me in November of 2006. And said, "Hey, I'm getting tired of doing this by myself. I'd like some help." Actually, I think he said he wanted to get out on his bike more, and said, "Would you like to help me?" And yeah, it was perfect timing. I had just ended a contract at Electronic Arts, and so I started at Dave Smith Instruments, right? Whatever the first work day of 2007. And have been there since.
Tell him your original title.
My original title, since there were just the two of us, was I was the other guy. That was actually on my business cards. Yes,
Dave Smith, the other guy. That's fantastic. That is amazing.
And amazingly, one of the great things about Dave is he's not a micromanager. He is very trusting of people. Maybe I shouldn't say he's too trusting, but he put his trust in me to do various things that I was not expecting to do. The first of which was that very shortly after I started, he asked me to do the graphic design and the mechanical design of the Prophet-5, which is I had no experience doing that. I had some graphic design experience, but not anything like that. And I've just kind of kept doing that. So that's what I do. I do the front panel layouts and I do the mechanical design of the products.
That's fantastic.
It's more than that. I think that probably Andrew is clearly the lead design guy and conceptual guy. Like I said earlier, when the two of us agree on something, then that usually settles it. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that we don't get tons of contributions from everybody else, because virtually everybody in the company is a synth nut and has tons of ideas, and everything interweaves. And so it's never a black and white thing. But there's been a lot of synths where Andrew just comes up with this idea and then draws a panel, and I kind of go, holy shit. And then if we do this, it'd be even better. And then he goes, holy shit, yeah. And before we know it,
a perfect example is in the Pro 3. When I did the initial drawing right from the start, I had Oscillator 3 as a a digital oscillator, a wavetable oscillator, mostly because I wanted to have a sine wave sub and complex LFOs, because Oscillator 3, as on a certain other synthesizer, can be switched to low frequency mode. And that was really about it. So there was just this knob on there for oscillator 3 that was a wavetable oscillator, and the other guys really kind of ran with that, and it did almost nothing up until almost the end of the synth, and then the other guys really kind of jumped in and made that what it is, which is like way beyond what I had initially envisioned.
Yeah, we do that sometimes. We have placeholder knobs or features. And the vintage knob was the same way. I mentioned that earlier. It was, well, we have to have this, and we kind of had an idea what it might do, but it wasn't until later in the project that we implemented it. And yeah, it was very late in the game when we defined what a wavetable really was.
But you know what? That's very consistent with you guys. That's what you guys are, like the slop knob, and then the distortion knob, and all that really fun different knobs and all the different modules that you have. It's just, it adds that extra little something to each and every one. Let's talk about that version knob, and let's go back to the versions of the Prophet-5. We got V1, V2, V3. First of all, were the V1s as bad as what people are saying as far as I mean,
bad in a reliability sense, but
yes,
awesome in the way they sounded.
Right. That's what you hear. You hear that they sound great, but sometimes they were just they'd have a little reliability problem.
Sometimes, like all the time. There were only 182 of those.
Really?
Yeah, and so there's very few of them in the wild right now, especially functioning Rev 1s.
Now, were those the ones that were hand built? Were those the hand assembled ones?
They were all hand assembled, really. We had our own factory, so we had people putting parts on the circuit boards and wave soldering them and clipping leads and wiring them up and
wow.
Putting it together and testing it and fixing them. And yeah, it was hand built.
I ran the wave solder machine for a while.
It's amazing your brain isn't toasted then.
Yeah.
There's some good chemicals in that stuff.
Yeah, no kid. Well, maybe it is. I used to put army men in there and watch him melt.
That's awesome. Okay, so then you went to V2. What was the defining difference between the V1 and the V2?
I don't remember the details. It was the same chipset. We were still using solid state music.
Okay.
I think I just probably tweaked the boards enough to make it more reliable than the Rev 1s. But it was still, somewhat basic. I think it was more just so we could actually build a few more, because the other ones were just so hard to get out the door.
Gotcha.
But it was basically the same product, same sound, maybe just not quite as sloppy as the very first ones.
And then you went to V3. After that, you changed chipsets.
Yeah, because we were just talking about this today, maybe, because we started shipping in maybe March, April of '78, and the Rev 3, as close as we can remember, came out in 1980, maybe 81 even. And during that time, we only built 1,200 total Prophet-5s, as partly because we just couldn't keep up, partly because the chipsets didn't work very well. A lot of times we'd have to reject whole batches of them because, you'd plug them in and the release time would go from, I forget, I think it went from 30 seconds down to 1 second when they got hot, or maybe it was the other way around, stuff like that. And so we just realized we had to change the chipset if we expected to stay in business. And then that spawned the whole, Curtis Park's Rev 2 sounds so much better and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And, I've always argued that. I think they sound different. But one of the things that we actually realized while building the Rev 4 as part of the vintage knob was that so much of that sound that everybody liked was the envelopes being all over the place. The perfect case of that, and this is actually on an Oberheim, but it's the same thing, is the Tom Sawyer patch. The OBX, had the same problem. The envelopes were just all over the place. And that's why that one particular sound is so great is because every voice is going at a different rate in a different time, and you put it together and it's just awesome. And it's the same on the Rev 2s. You hit you play a pad, and it just seems so thick because, the envelopes are all different, the tuning is all different, the filters are all different. That's half. I won't put a percentage on it, but that's a huge part of why a Rev 3s sound different than the Rev 2s, because the Rev 3s were much tighter. They weren't perfect either, but they were much tighter on all parameters.
Yeah, so I have a Rev 2 Prophet-5, and when I first got the Rev 4, I brought it home and set it up next to the Rev 2 and started trying to see how close that I could get, and I was extremely worried because it was not close at all. It was like, man, this is just not happening, and I'm not sure why. And then shortly after that, the first sort of real implementation of vintage was done, and I updated the OS, and all of a sudden it was like, wow, okay, I can actually make it sound like that.
What did you have to add in a little chaos? Is that basically, you had to add a little?
Well, not wanting to give away any trade secrets,
sure.
But it's, as you know from our slop knob, that was different because it was time varying and, only on pitch. This goes a lot further and it's just implemented differently. But the idea is as you turn the knob up, all the voices tend to loosen up in many different ways. And again, even if you go all the way to the end, it's actually still playable. Whereas if you turn slop all the way up, it's usually not playable unless you're onto that effect. But it's turned out really musical. Like I said, you'll all try it at some point. We just started shipping this week. The units are going out the door. Some people have already gotten them, so they'll be out soon.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice because you can still get totally modern sounds out of it too, where that's warranted. If you want everything like tight and solid and perfect, you can get that, but you can also get the vintage thing.
The vintage thing.
Yeah.
I'll use the software synth if I want something that's perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, but perfect, it's still at VCOs, so they're, even though the tuning is perfect, they may only be, a tenth of a hertz off, if that. They're still VCOs.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
I'm sorry. Anytime somebody says soft,
I was saying that sarcastically. I hate software synth. I am the biggest hardware guy out there.
I could tell from what's behind you.
Yeah. Hey, I have a quick question. Can I jump in on this?
Absolutely.
And that is, owning an OB6 and soon hopefully being the owner of a wonderful new Prophet-5 as well. Did you guys have to resist the temptation to put DSP, reverb and delay and stuff like that on board?
It came up. I think it might have been on a list at one point, and then we just all realized that if we go down that road, we're just going to end up with the Prophet-6. Yeah. And now they're two different instruments. They're completely different. They have their own sound. Prophet-6 actually has a lot more features. It's more portable. There's a lot of really, well, you guys know, it's an awesome axe. But no, it's a slippery slope. And on a normal product, trying to decide where to stop. And on this guy, it was absolutely critical that we stop things like that in its tracks and just said, no, we're not doing it.
Well, one of the really eye-opening things with this instrument, as someone who has, I won't say playing because I'm not a keyboard player, but playing with Prophet-5s for 40 years, is that the addition of just a few features can totally change your approach to the instrument and the way you play it and the sounds you make, which is kind of amazing. I mean, even things that seem as minor as adding half keyboard tracking on the filter, it's got a very simple velocity implementation. It's just a switch. You can either have filter or amplifier or both velocity modulation. And just having velocity on a Prophet-5 suddenly makes you like do different things.
Yeah, that blew us all away on that one. It was like,
that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, because I'll tell you, I got to tell you a story about the original Prophet-5. So I started touring in the 90s. The Prophet had been out since, the early 80s, and I got my hands on a Prophet-5. And so I'm keyboard teching and telling the guys to set everything up, and I'm having them run, stereo lines to everything. I didn't know it was only a mono output.
Well, that's a good point. There was a time when we were considering stereo output, and it was just like the FX. We just said, no, it's mono. And if we figured if people, all these things go through our heads about how people are going to respond. And our answer became on almost anything when people says, how come it's only mono? How come it doesn't have this? It's because it's a Prophet-5.
Exactly.
Shut up. It's a Prophet-5. That's what it does.
That's what so many people don't understand. Like, I did some research, and I'm going on through all the boards and everything, and they're just saying, well, is it going to dilute the whole Prophet? And there's all these different Prophets, and damn you, I just bought this Prophet and that and everything. And I'm like, I don't think anybody of these guys actually looked at the back just to see the output, just like what a Prophet-5 was, and if they did, they would understand where it fits in and why it is such a big deal.
Yeah, we even went so far as to put the original, and the original has a CV and a gate output, and CV and gate in. We did it. We implemented it the same way. So whatever last note hit goes out, CV and gate. And if you have a gate plugged in, it takes over voice 5. And so you can plug whatever you want into it. 1 volt per octave, 5 octave range. It's, and some people actually use that these days because modular is back to no small degree. But there were other funny things that we implemented, and then we kind of said, we might want to give them an alternate way of doing that in the global section, because people do things differently than they did back then.
I'll tell you, one of the great things about the Prophet-5 that I think is the mono output, and the fact that what makes it so relevant to today is the fact that you have these sonic possibilities with the vintage and the version knobs that can just take synthesis to just a whole new level. And it's a great source just straight into recording, or with all the ways you can modulate sound now, with all the different effects and all the different things. If you run it into live and then use like movement from output and do some really cool, there's just so many possibilities, and you've got such a beefy bass. You've got the sequential Prophet-5 bed that's just so iconic. So I'm really looking forward to that. Let me ask you, Dave and Andrew, are you guys afraid though? Is there going to be a dilution of the Prophet line, or are we like, you've got everything covered? You have a really great chart, by the way. I just want to encourage people, if they want to see where, all the Prophets lay into the whole thing, you got that great PDF that you can download. But any fear of diluting the Prophet line, or how do you feel about that?
Diluting it how? I'm not sure I quite understand.
There's is there room for another Prophet in there? Is there room for, it's like people are under the wrong assumption that all these keyboards are kind of the same, because they kind of look at the Prophet as, Prophet's this and Prophet's that, Prophet this, and I'm just wondering it.
Fender this, Fender that. Yeah. All the same.
All right.
There's always the thought that, okay, if we come out with this, are people going to stop buying Prophet-6s? It seems like, because I did kind of say 6 years ago that the Prophet-6 has the soul of the Prophet-5. Obviously looked somewhat like it, even though it was a different instrument. I think it really does have the same analog soul, but it's not a Prophet-5. And we thought, well, maybe fewer people buy Prophet-6s, but hasn't happened yet. People are still ordering them. We're still shipping them. So, but yeah, it is. If you don't understand what the synths are, you know, it's hard. Well, is a Prophet-12 like a Prophet-5? Well, of course not. But unless you play them both, you won't know. So you have to hope that people at least go out and try it.
I gotta say too, as a player, stepping in front of any of these instruments brings out something completely different. You know, even if there's some similarity to a sound source, it's immediately negated by the fact that you play completely differently with them, and you grab the knobs and you come up with completely different stuff. So there's so much about the design of the instrument that's an inspiration to the players that, I mean, I think maybe seeing the word Prophet on it, if somebody's not a player, makes them think, oh, these must all be related. But the truth is, as a player, you're going to come out with totally different stuff on each one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how many synthesizers has Roland made in the last
Jupiters,
40 or 50
JPs,
years? JX, 3P, you know, all of these different things, and they're all different. They're all different. So,
and they're all digital.
Unfortunately now,
there was a period of about 15 years when they were all exactly the same. So they did make that mistake.
You mean the Rompler stuff? But yeah, but I mean the era of the Junos and the Jupiters and the JX series and all of that.
Yeah,
those
I rotate the camera. Yeah, that era is well represented.
There we go. The SH-101. I mean, yeah, and it is kind of funny that those were all analog or partially analog synths. You're absolutely right.
The originals, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, you know, branding is branding, and, you know, we're actually tired of using the Prophet name. Obviously, you know, maybe this will be the last one. I don't know, you know, because it does get confusing after a while. But your comments, Rob, are exactly what we try to do on our designs. We try to make them all have their own personality. And we see this all the time, you know, not these days, but when we actually could have visitors in our demo room in our office, you know, people would come in, and for a long time it was like, do you want the Prophet-6 or the OB6? And you just watch them go back and forth. And some people would immediately go to love the Oberheim sound. The others would just love the P6 sounds. Other people can't decide, so they buy both eventually. But they're clearly, even though they have some physical similarities and feature similarities, they're completely different musical instruments. So it's just fun to be able to give people variety and choices of what exact personality you want out of your instrument, what gives you the most inspiration.
Yeah, well, to some extent, it's what gives us the most inspiration too, because it's not like we sit down when we finish a product and think, okay, what Prophet are we going to make now? we come up with something that we think is interesting and that would be fun to work on, and we make it. It's not the name is kind of insignificant in a way, but
yeah, they're not all the same keyboards in different versions. They're all different instruments, and I have a Prophet-12 and I also have a Prophet-X, and they are just total opposites on both sides. So yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to stress is the fact that, you know, you go on these boards and you go and you look at some of these comments and people think it's the same instrument, all these different versions. No, it's different keyboards and they all do different things. And that's what's great about the PDF that you guys put out. You know, you tell exactly what each synth is, what they each does, and where it kind of lands on the whole spectrum. So I really think that's great.
Well, it's like looking at a wall of acoustic guitars and saying, well, what's the difference? They all look the same. Or, you know, all these, everything has 6 strings, you know, how could they possibly be different? But I will let you in on one inside secret on the Prophet-X as far as naming. We tried really hard to come up with an alternate name for that. And I think we finally gave up and said, let's just call it a Prophet something. And somebody said, well, how about Prophet-X, you know? And we just kind of said, okay, because, you know, there have been times where we don't, and that would have been a good one to have a new name on, but it's really, really hard now to come up with a name. Somebody would come up with something great, and you do a search, and there's some wacko software thing somewhere that has that name. Or somebody used it, you know, 20 years ago on a synth or a keyboard or something. So it's not easy to come up with a good name. So if any of you guys have some really good names, send me an email.
The Prophet X is the Susudio of keyboard names.
Well, and I will tell you that it has to be the Prophet X. Don't call it a Prophet 10 because there was
No.
only one Prophet
Yeah.
10. All right.
Well, except now there's two.
Yeah.
Yeah, now there's two, and we have actually had one dealer a few days ago, because we have the Prophet-5 and the 10, and he had a picture of the dual manual for the 10 on their website. And we had to say, excuse me, that's not the right one. We've had a lot of people are connecting. I had another connection in LA, a good friend, and he said, well, I said, you want the 5 or the 10? He says, well, I don't really need the extra keyboard, so I'll get the 5. And I said,
well, let's
Yeah,
you know what
polyphony.
let's talk about the 10. Is the main difference the extra voices, the 5 extra voices?
that's it. And you know, you probably, I don't know if you watched the intro video, but you know, it's that's what I tried to do the very first time.
Right.
You could buy it as a Prophet-5 or Prophet 10. I think out of the first 10 units we shipped, probably half of them were Prophet 10s, I think. And they just, you know, the Rev 1s were unreliable as it was, and he tried to do 10 voices, and it was just not worth it. I think there's, as far as we know, there's one functional Prophet 10 still in the world, I think in Canada maybe. And there's rumors of 1 or 2 others, but I don't know that they actually work. But, so that's a very rare one. But now it's back. Now you get the real thing, and it actually works.
I'll tell you, the one thing I love about the old Prophet 10, though, is when it came out, that was the sexiest keyboard known to mankind. Like, when you see that thing, I'll never forget in Keyboard Magazine seeing a picture of that, and I was just, it was just drool worthy. It was like a pinup if you're a synth nerd, you know.
It's like Jimmy Page with like the 12 string and the 6-string electric double neck guitar. It's just as awesome.
One of my favorite user synthesizer modifications was on a Prophet 10. When we first started shipping the 2 manual Prophet 10, it had a backup tape drive that was in the lower front left, like the one in your picture there. And the tape drive was very, very unreliable. So we changed to another one, but it was like a little micro cassette or mini cassette kind of tape, and it was in the side panel. So if you converted your original Prophet 10, well, original 2 manual Prophet 10, to the new tape drive, it left this hole in the front. And one of the customers found an ashtray from a car that fit right in that hole. So he actually had an ashtray in the front of his Prophet 10.
He was smoking around a Prophet 10?
Well, that was in the days where people smoked inside.
Oh, I know.
It's hard to imagine that now.
It really is. Hey, Brandon, first of all, Brandon was the one who introduced me to how to use the slop knob correctly. And what do you think of all, because I know you had the Prophet 12, and just, I want to get you involved in this conversation on the Prophet 5. You ever play an original Prophet 5?
I never have. That was my first, you know, it was just a little back. You guys all know this, but for Dave and Andrew, you know, I grew up on soft synths, you know, and Prophet 12 was my first actual synth. You know, it's digital, but it's got those analog filters, right? So that was my first intro into actual synths, and I got some great sounds out of it, and still do. But yeah, me and Mike had a conversation about that. To get that analog feel, more of an analog feel out of it, and that slop knob goes a long way. And there was something one of the like distortions or saturators, a little bit of that helped as well. And you can get some really nice
drive control.
Yeah, the drive one, you can get some really nice, not in front of me right now, right? Look at the knob, but you can get some really nice, you know, for a digital synth, very analog sounding stuff out of that stuff.
The drive control that Bob Coover, Bob Coover was responsible for that. And it's actually the tape saturation from an Echoplex model.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
It's gorgeous when you start playing it and you hit a little bit, you put a little fuzz on some of your sounds, man. It's just, woof. It's just a great sound.
Yeah, you can take that one very aggressive as well. You know, you can do like 9 Inch Nails type, you know, aggressive stuff with some of those distortions. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Still one of my favorites.
let me ask you guys. So obviously you make this announcement, it comes out, and you see all the stuff that comes back. Does any of the negative comments, any of that stuff surprise you? Because it surprises me, but I'm just wondering from your perspective, does it surprise you? I know it doesn't bother you because we've talked to you before, but are you ever amazed at like, wow, the trolls can just go all kinds of places?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, if you spend any time online looking at any kind of forum or public posting area, whatever, how could you be surprised?
Yeah,
It's true.
And I avoid forums like the plague. So I don't know what anybody's saying, and I don't care. And I take that even into design. I don't want to know what other people are doing. I don't want to know what everybody wants, put it that way. That's maybe a little egotistical to have that approach. I don't need to talk to musicians, but I think the forums are about the worst place to look, because it can be really distracting. It seems like, wow, all these people really want this, and really it's like three guys in Germany who have never bought a synth in their life. So it's no, you can't go there. And even if it's a musical instrument, not everybody's going to love it. I like some guitars and I don't like other guitars. I was never a Strat guy, but I like Tellys. What does that mean? Nothing. It's artists have their own preferences. But on the other hand, we can ignore it even more, because we can look at how fast our backlog of orders is growing, and it's gotten a little out of hand even for us. I'm not sure how we're going to catch up. It's been really surprising, actually. It's been awesome to see the orders come in. It's validation, I suppose.
Well, I have a very small circle of friends and advisors, typically professional keyboard players or synth players or whatever, that I do talk to and get opinions, but I never go to them and say, what do you want? It's always, I'm thinking about doing this. Is this stupid? And then they'll say yes or no or whatever. But that's about as far as it goes.
What amazes me is the fact that, like I said, I went in deep dive and I went tell about different boards and things like that. But the reality is musical manufacturers, they don't owe anybody anything. They're going to come up with their product, and they're going to come out with it because they want to, and at whatever price level they want. And let me just tell you this. You pay for quality, and there's a big difference between knockoffs and the real thing. And one of the things that excites me about having a new keyboard, especially like the Prophet, is the fact that when you get a quality keyboard, you spin those knobs, you turn those knobs, there's a feedback that you get from the knob itself. And when you connect that to the sound of what you're doing, and as you're programming it, and you feel it, and you hear the envelope, and you adjust a filter or something, there's just something great about working with really good, high quality instruments that just really inspire you. And you see a lot of these comments about different manufacturers and blah 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 blah, and like, look, you pay for quality, and your instruments, sequential instruments, they're for a certain level, they're for pros, and it's a pro level, and it's something for people to aspire to go to, and people to get up to that level. I didn't start out with buying a Prophet-12 and going. I worked my way up, and I had to do it just like everybody else did. But I'll tell you what, once you get a really quality instrument and you start using it on a daily basis, you realize how important this is. And not only that, but if you're a touring musician, I mean, not that anybody's touring right now anyhow, there's something about the quality about the keyboard always working when you have to perform. I mean, there's no bigger pressure cooker than loading in at the last minute, and in like 2 hours you're going to have doors, and you have to make sure that keyboard works and every key works. So I just want to say that, I love quality instruments. I love manufacturers like Sequential, and just look, this is what it is. This is what it's cost, but it's an investment, and it really is, and it's an investment in a tool. It's much like API gets the same type of stuff, but their stuff is built like a tank. And Dave, your gear is great. I mean, I love the feel of your knobs. I mean, I'm a total knob twister, and I just love that feedback. And I don't know how to put it into, like, how to communicate that to people who don't know, but when you go to a cheap synth and they have that little plastic knob, and it just doesn't feel like quality. But when you go to a quality synth that has, really good knobs, and it's just, you can touch it and you can play it, it's part, I mean, it literally is, it's inspiring. It just brings something out. I mean, what do you think, guys? I mean, are you agreeing with that?
I don't think there's any question. I think that's the case with a lot of great instruments. My Mini Moog, I feel the same way, but my OB6, oh my God, the feeling of the keyboard itself, the ability that I have to be able to, dig into the velocity is lovely. The feel of the rubberized wheels is lovely. And the knobs are creamy as all get out. It's just a beautiful, the whole package is all done by people who very clearly know what they're doing and know how to be able to make something that feels good to somebody who, is an experienced synthesist. 100% agreed.
Well, it's probably fairly obvious, but we are not a marketing-driven company. And with only a couple of exceptions, we haven't really tried to hit a price point or consider how much something is going to cost until we get to the end and to see what it costs. Some people don't believe that. I mean, I've seen things like that on the forums about, oh, this should be like half of what it costs. And well, have you tried actually making a synthesizer?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not jacking the prices up. There is nobody makes synthesizers to get rich. And if they thought that was possible, they're morons. You do it because you like doing it.
Yeah.
And then,
as a sound designer, because I use your synths in a totally different way, there's something about the hardware that, because I'm a tone freak, that it just has a sound, has an aggressiveness, has a bite. As a guitar player, everything has a feel and a sound. And I find with a lot of the analog synths, especially the hardware compared to software, there's a certain, my first synth was a Pro 1. I was a Berkeley College student. Yep. I still have it. It's in pristine condition. And then, so many great sound effects on the Pro 1. I remember I was a live sound mixer at Disneyland, and they used to have a bunch of Prophet-5s in the back for the band, and I was always zipping in the back, programming, playing, trying to create really cool patches, and because I was really into patches. And but I think there's something different about a hardware device than software. It just has a different bite, feel. It's the same thing with certain outboard gear. It just has a tone.
Well, it's look and feel as much as anything, and the sound is just the kicker. And I won't go through my story that you've all heard about my epiphany after, Seer system that Andrew mentioned, where we actually did the first soft synth ever. Yeah, well, that was my first hardware after 15 years, you just realize that's awesome. You're missing a knob, man.
You need a knob.
Yeah, what about that?
We know some guys.
I just
Prophet-5 is missing a slide or two. We got to talk.
Well, what it was for me, I'll try to keep this short, is Roger Lynn was working on his Adrenaline, and it was taking him a little while to finish it up, so I helped him a little bit in software and a couple things. And partway through it, I realized how cool it was to hold a product, have knobs that will always do the same thing, and 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't have to update it every 2 years or every 6 months. I'm not tied to somebody else's OS. It's my OS. I do the whole thing. And so, if you look at the Evolver desktop, there's some similarities to the Adrenaline. I mean, I kind of copied the basic matrix for all the parameters that Roger had. I think I even used the same PIC, same processor, and the same DSP chip. So that was it, because I found myself never using Reality, which is the Seer Systems software. And it did all this great stuff. It had, subtractive and additive and FM and physical modeling and samples. And it sounded reasonably good, but it was no fun. I mean, it's just no fun. So I stopped. I never used it. And I said, why am I never using it? Well, if it's not fun. I
will say I used it because remember, Andrew, when we were putting together the demos for the trade show or whatever that.
Yeah.
Mr. Rollins, I used it a lot. I mean, these guys were so on the cutting edge of what became the soft synth world.
Yeah.
Back at what years would that have been?
95, I'm guessing. 94, 95, 96.
That was pioneering days back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
When Intel came out with, was it the MMX processor? Is that what it was?
Well, it was the Pentiums that finally made it happen.
That's right.
Yeah, we actually did one under contract to Intel for the 486. Was the very first version. Second version we licensed to Creative Labs, and then the third one was when computers got fast enough that we could actually do a professional version.
Yeah, those were definitely pioneering days. That was not easy.
Well, hey, listen, we're going to, believe it or not, we're going to have to start wrapping this up, man. Time just flew by. But, I just want to mention, it's, no one here is anti-soft synth. Well, at least I'm not anti-soft. I don't want to speak for everybody. but there's,
they serve their purpose.
Exactly. There's just a great blend. And I just think, stop listening to the trolls, if you're out there and reading all these boards, and just, if you can, go and see if you can get a demo and just see what a real instrument is like, and if you can't get it now, don't worry about it. There's aspirations, you can, if you get to a point where your music allows you to get that, I tell you, it's a really great feeling to arrive at certain milestones, especially gear milestones, which is something we should talk about probably in another podcast, gear milestones, because we all have had gear milestones. Like, you've made it when you hit boom, when you get this, boom, boom, boom. So I think that's a great topic. I just want to thank Dave and Andrew for joining us on the podcast. Thank you so much, guys. It was so great to get the insight and get some stories, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks
Dave,
for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was fun.
And I want to say that Dave holds a special place for the Audio Nowcast because he was on episode number 1 of our web series Spaces, so you can check it out. And it was a really great interview. And he's also been a guest on the podcast, and he told some really great stories about the early days and about basically inventing MIDI and all the other wonderful stuff. So there's just a lot of good times with Dave Smith on the Audio Nowcast, and so I just gotta thank you. Before we get going, is anybody working on anything they wanna talk about? Nick, you working on anything fun and exciting you can talk about?
There's been something that I've been keeping back for quite some time, and now I can talk about it because it's out in the wild. It's really interesting, the two different sides of my life along these lines. So the Disney stores asked me to write a song which they're currently using in a contest all over the country because kids can't go out and go trick-or-treating this year. And so the result of that is that I wrote a dance number for them that they recorded, and you can go and you can dance in your favorite Disney costume to the music and then send your video in, and then you're eligible for like $1,000, gift certificate, that kind of thing. So
Cool.
I'd been working on that for a while, and I was really excited that that's out in the world, and I hope that it brings some kids some happiness this Halloween. And then on the other, and then on the completely other side, I just finished getting all of my social media stuff completely rejiggered. So I put all my music up on Bandcamp. I redid my Under the Big Tree website that was about all the YouTube videos that I do about synthesizers, and I created nicholaspeck.com, which talks more about the actual serious compositional side of what I do. So I've got all this weird artsy synthesizer music on one side, and then like dance music for Disney on the other side.
Well, that's cool. I got to check that out because I know you're a heady guy, and I know your compositions are pretty cool. Anybody else want to plug anything really quick before we roll?
I don't want to plug anything, but I have a quick request for Dave and Andrew. I think I have the perfect idea for another feature for the vintage knob.
Okay.
So, see behind me is my 40-year-old Prophet-5 with its crooked smile.
Yeah.
I think you should make it where on the new one, you turn the vintage knob, the keys slowly like
the key bushings fall apart.
Start clicking.
They start clicking and the keys like become all uneven.
Well, you know what we could do actually. You know how if you haven't cleaned it in like 20 minutes, how they you get multiple triggers. We could do that in software.
Yeah.
That would be the ultimate random.
And it's random because some keys will work, other keys will bounce more, other keys will bounce a little.
See, we missed the opportunity. We had, we got the spring reverb thing in the Prophet-6. We could have had J wires in the Rev-4.
Does everybody know the secret spring reverb thing in the Prophet-6?
No.
Oh, awesome. We never copped up to it. If you had the spring reverb effect on and you're playing, if you whack the side of it, you get a spring reverb twang.
Awesome.
I love it.
I think does the OB6 do that too?
It should. I don't know why we wouldn't have. It's the same main board. It still has the
That's great.
Yeah, Nick, you can try that out.
I just could not imagine hitting the side of my OB6. But I'll have to give it a shot.
Try it. Give it a good whack. Not a little tap. You gotta.
I might just have to take your word on that one.
Try it. Have some fun.
All right.
If it breaks, we'll fix it.
Before we go, besides the spring reverb, I mean, you guys working on anything you can talk about?
No, you can't stop us. I love this instrument. I just I got the very first Prophet-10 off the line, I think last week, on Friday, but I haven't had a chance to bring it home. I live in St. Helena, and it's like I'm on fire up here, so we bailed and evacuated for a week, but now we're back. And today was the first time I was able to plug it in. I have a real nice Meyer system here with the sub. Man, that sounds so good. Anyhow, I diverge a little because it sounds so good and we love it to death, but we're all going crazy over the next two products we're working on. And we're actually working on two in tandem, and they're both pretty far along, and they're going to be awesome, but I'm not going to tell you shit about them.
and we're not counting the Prophet-5 and 10 desktop modules.
No, module versions are out. In fact, we just got the first one put together today, and so we'll be posting photos of it and hopefully shipping around the end of the year. But no, those don't count.
That's amazing. Well, Dave, you are the coolest man in synthesis right now. Look at that. Look at that shot right there. I love this picture because it's just you doing your thing, and it's pretty awesome. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. And if you have any comments or questions, you can reach us at audio@nowcastnetwork.com. That's audio@nowcastnetwork.com. And if you have any comments or questions for Dave and Andrew, they're not going to read them anyhow, so don't. No. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure you can send them an email. All right. For myself and all the guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
We do it all through plan.
Thanks for listening to the Audio Nowcast, sponsored by API and Wire World Pro Audio. The Audio Nowcast is hosted by Mike Rodriguez and features a panel with Rob Arbittier, Bobby Osinski, Scott Gershin, Nick Peck, Diego Stucco, Brandon Burnside, Martin Page, Bobby Summerfield, and maybe a guest or two. We'll see you next time.